Are you guys awake still? Good, just checking. Great, well, I'd like to begin by sharing a story about two girls. Munya and I were neighbors in the densely populated urban sprawl of Dhaka, Bangladesh. Yet we lived extremely different lives. Now, in Dhaka, it wasn't uncommon to find a situation like ours, where an 8-foot concrete wall separated the beautiful and intricate structures of my white house from her shabby makeshift shelter in the slum located directly outside of my bedroom window. And although we shared Road 33, Gulshan Avenue, it would lead us to different destinations. And each weekday morning, I'd walk down the unlevel road, and I admit I was often late to catch my bus to school. But Munya's strides down the same road would not necessarily lead her to school, but rather to a long day of rebuilding the family shelter, taking care of her siblings, or maybe selling items at the local market. But the cool thing was that our friendship transcended these barriers of structural inequality. I spent the last few days of summer prior to my freshman year at William&Mary with Munya, flipping through the fashion spreads of 17 magazine and trying new Bengali food that I hadn't tried before. But as I went on to college and graduated, and am now employed, thank you, Jesus, Munya's own educational and career paths remain unknown to me. Munya's story and the stories of many other women in the global South have inspired my historical innovation, which for the purposes of this presentation, I'll define as the social, political, and economic ideas that women can contribute to the advancement of society if given the opportunity. Now, this story really is a tale about love, sacrifice, and most importantly, the endless pursuit of knowledge. So like many great stories, my herstory begins with love. From the very beginning, my parents' relationship would challenge the status quo. For one, it was taboo for my Mende father to marry my Timni mother because the two tribes are big rivals in Sierra Leone, really a consequence of colonialism's arbitrary boundaries. But my father's a pretty stubborn man, so decades of ethnic conflict would not be enough to prevent him from pursuing his romantic desires for my mother. One day, while they were both teachers in the small village of Yanibana, my father intentionally forgot his umbrella so that he could ask my mother to share hers under the tropical monsoon rain. Now that is a pickup line. When she agreed, really that was the beginning of their story, because my parents decided to choose knowledge over ignorance, true love over familial expectations, and their future together over a country's broken past. And as they went on to have children, again, my parents would contest tradition. And having not given birth to a single baby boy, they instead chose to invest in educating their 4 daughters. Now, you can't tell from this picture because my dad's really great at concealing his emotions. But he is ecstatic about the financial burdens of taking care of 5 women, so. When my family escaped Sierra Leone's brutal civil war in 1994, my father's status as a United Nations diplomat offered my 3 sisters and I the opportunities to attend international schools in Pakistan, Kenya, Uganda, Bangladesh, and Jordan. Our frequent visits to more than 24 of the world's nations reveal the world's cultural mosaic, exposing us to a variety of people, religions, and ideologies. And although I am very grateful for these experiences, I am simultaneously very aware that my herstory compares in stark contrast to more than 35 million girls around the world who are out of school. 35 million. So my personal, academic, and professional experiences have really kind of instilled in me a passion and an acute understanding for both the importance as well as the benefits of educating adolescent girls, particularly those coming from non-Western societies or the global South, whatever terminology you'd like to see. According to the Human Development Index, Educating girls is one of the key ways of achieving many of the 2015 Millennium Development Goals. It is a cost-effective means of addressing income poverty, hunger, maternal and child mortality, disease, inadequate shelter, and environmental degradation. But given that gender biases do manifest differently within different cultural contexts, policymakers need to do a better job of understanding the communities which they're working with in order to implement appropriate interventions. Now, there's great need for educational policies that are effective, inclusive, but most importantly, culturally relevant. Just to give you guys some concrete examples of some past programs, the United Nations World Food Program has a school feeding project whereby they provide meals for children at school in order to create an incentive for many poor families to send their children to school, knowing that's where their child will receive their one meal for that day. Additionally, student participatory governance programs have also proven effective. Really, the idea behind these is to relieve the stress from parents and really allowing students to take initiative with their own education, whether that means raising money to finance their own tuition and books, working on the curriculum structure, even the physical structure of their schools. When I came to William&Mary in 2007, I majored in sociology, yes, wanting to learn more about social inequality and hopefully come up with some solutions of my own. On my first day of Principles of Sociology, Professor Kate Slevin introduced herself and then boldly stated, "I am the F word, dun dun dun, a feminist." Now, while the rest of Andrews 101 kind of gasped in shock and chuckled in their seats, I smiled confidently in mine, convinced that I had chosen the right major. Professor Kate Slevin would go on to become my academic advisor, a mentor, and a friend, encouraging me to ask the questions that no one else would ask. Yes, I was that girl in class. And also just really to come up with some of my own innovative ideas. So I did just that, and I delved into literature, reading everything and anything that I came across in the classroom. But as I researched, I noticed that my herstory was rarely in the textbook. There were limited stories of women like myself from the global South. And although I admire the work of first wave feminists and the cultural revolution of the 1960s second wave feminism, many of the topics we talked about in class and that were present in our readings seemed almost irrelevant to the issues of non-Western societies and also critical of the lifestyle of these women. Just to give you guys some concrete examples, the issue of women in the workforce. Now, in the West, that's a big debate. Can women balance their roles as mothers and as professionals? But it's important to note in non-Western societies, women have been working their entire lives. And they've been successful in balancing these roles. Now, granted, it is in the primary sector, so you're mostly looking at farming, you're looking at maybe manufacturing jobs, but regardless, women have been successful in balancing their roles as mothers as well as being in professional careers. Additionally, the issue of contraceptive use, another big issue in the West. Again, my textbooks were critical of the fact that these women were not using contraceptives. But again, it's important to note that the lack of contraceptive use in non-Western societies is not an issue of ignorance, but one of expenses. Now, if you can't afford to feed your children, if you don't have access to clean water, using contraceptives may not be high on your list of priorities. Again, not to say it's not important, just not high on your list of priorities. Similarly, the issue of the high childbirth rates, another topic that my textbooks were critical of. Why are these women having so many children? But note that these women strategically gave birth to many children because due to high infant mortality rates, they knew and expected only a few of their children to even make it past the age of 5. So consequently, I realized that to be historically innovative meant that I was required to create my own story, one that would combine my cultural heritage with my Western education. And in my herstory, I am the protagonist, I am the heroine, and I'm the teacher. And I could teach women like myself from the global South to create relevant and accessible research. And when conducted with integrity and intelligence, this research could fight injustice, propel social change, and even save lives. And I was fortunate enough to attend an institution that would encourage my historical innovation, William and Mary proved to be historically innovative in 1918 when it first allowed women to the college's doors. And again, my relationships with many of my professors proved that being historically innovative was still a priority of the college. Professor Amy Quirk, professor of sociological theory and international development and globalization, would really kind of listen to the ideas that I had. She provided me additional readings as well as internship opportunities that catered more to the topics I was most passionate about. To get a B on an assignment, she really made sure that I had understood the concept and that I could convey my ideas effectively. But to get an A, I had to come up with a solution to world hunger. So needless to say, A's were not common on my transcript. It's okay. Professor Gül Özigen, a Turkish immigrant who, like myself, had come to the United States to pursue higher education, would teach me about the varying experiences of women in the workforce. But most importantly, the day she candidly expressed the contradictions she experienced being a professor who would strongly advocate against socially constructed gender roles, yet adhere to those very roles in her own personal life, her vulnerability really inspired me and enabled me to realize that sometimes, despite our best intentions, our ideologies are inconsistent with our realities. And there are many more faculty at William & Mary who've really kind of inspired me, but none would teach me more about the value of hard work and sacrifice than my own mother. After my graduation in May of 2011, my mother and I sat in my dorm room in Jamestown North, my very messy dorm room, and we kind of just caught up because I hadn't seen her in a year, so she had come to the United States for my graduation. And so we talked a little bit about the past and just kind of, just catching up. And then she started to cry. And then, in our native Creole, she whispered, "Mi pikin, you don't try, oh. I'm so glad, and I did tell God thank you." Translation, "My daughter, you've done well. I'm so proud of you, and I give God all the praise." Now, I'll admit it was kind of a heavy situation, and I didn't know what to really say. So in my American accent, which kind of obscured the cultural present at that moment, I said, "Thanks, Mom. I'm proud of you, too." But at that moment, I remember the day that she left her country and her own mother so that the dreams of her 4 daughters would become her own. I remember the day we learned English words together, me, a student in grade school, and her, an educated and bright woman, but a foreigner to the language and cultures of her new environment. And with my diploma hanging on the wall, written in Latin, but still cool, I said we both knew that those sacrifices were not in vain. To be historically innovative requires a collective effort for an individual success story. Now, our history is filled with global revolutionaries who have paved the way for the numerous educational opportunities we all enjoy today. From the brave Little Rock Nine, to Brown versus the Board of Education, to our very own Hulan Willis Sr., the first African American to be admitted to the College of William and Mary in 1951. And then globally, from the Soweto uprising in South Africa, where thousands of youth, thousands, lost their lives protesting against an apartheid regime that would force them to learn Afrikaans in their schools when they instead wanted to learn the language, cultures, and histories of their own people. To the Iranian Revolution of the 1970s, where religious oppression and censorship would force many into exile from the place that they called home. But these individuals sacrificed because they knew that intellectual freedom is the best and most powerful freedom. Because it was through intellectual freedom that Martin Luther King Jr., behind the bars of his jail cell, would write the powerful and impactful letters from Birmingham jail that would expose to the world the hypocrisy of race relations in the United States during the 1960s civil rights movement. It was through intellectual freedom that Nelson Mandela, after 27 years of imprisonment, would become the first Black president of an independent and desegregated South Africa in 1994. And it was through intellectual freedom that opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi continued to fight for the human rights and democratic practices of the Burmese people while being under house arrest for 15 years until her recent release in 2010. But these individuals knew that a free mind was the most powerful tool that an individual could possess. With that said, we can't expect to solve many of the world's social, political, and economic problems without the input and innovative ideas of half of the world's population. Women's natural role as mothers, caregivers, and teachers makes it important that societies, both Western and non-Western, prioritize the education of women in their communities, because it was through intellectual freedom that I can stand here in front of you today and share these stories. But who knows, maybe Munya, if given the opportunity, would have been able to actualize her potential and share her innovative ideas. So today, I bring you Munya's story, I bring you my mother's story, and I bring you my own story in hope that you'll join me in making her story in the fight against gender education inequality in non-Western societies. Thank you.